everybody, Posture Me Perfect is back. And I was wondering to myself the other day, in preparation for this Kilimanjaro climb, since I am an endurance runner, I do recreational running, nothing crazy, nothing elite, but would that make me better off at higher altitudes? So we know that endurance training can benefit you with terms of doing longer hikes and things like that, but does it impact your ability to acclimatize when you get to higher altitudes like the peak of Mount Kilimanjaro? So I decided to do a search about it, and I found out that a lot of it has to do with your VO2 max value. So we're going to find out a little bit more about VO2 max and how it does affect our ability to acclimatize.
VO2 max has been defined as the highest rate of oxygen consumption attainable during maximum exercise. It is measured in milliliters per kilogram body weight per minute. It is generally expressed relative to body weight because oxygen energy needs differ relative to size. As exercise intensity increases, so does oxygen consumption, until a plateau is reached, which defines a person's VO2 max. It is generally considered the best indicator of cardiorespiratory endurance and aerobic fitness. A number of factors may affect VO2 max, such as age, biological sex, pre-existing training, changes in altitude, and actions of the respiratory muscles. Specifically related to altitude, VO2 max seems to decrease, especially above altitudes of 1,600 meters. At sea level, air exerts a pressure of approximately 760 millimeters of mercury, which is the unit that pressure is measured in. As the altitude increases, air exerts progressively lower pressures, so that, for example, at the summit of Mount Everest, air only exerts a pressure of around 230 millimeters of mercury. Therefore, if the barometric air pressure decreases at higher altitudes, so will the oxygen pressure correspondingly decrease, but still remember that it still compromises 21% of the total composition. This is important because after we inhale, air goes into our lungs to distal sacs called the alveoli, which are tiny air sacs in the lungs where gas exchange actually occurs. Oxygen molecules in the lungs in these sacs cross over the alveoli membrane and into the blood on the other side of this membrane. The oxygen in the blood is now transported to other body tissues. The gas exchange between the alveoli and blood takes place due to a pressure difference called a pressure gradient. The pressure oxygen exerts in the alveoli is greater than the pressure of oxygen in the blood surrounding the lungs. This drives oxygen from the alveoli into the bloodstream. It makes sense that any reduction in the pressure of oxygen entering the lungs will also reduce this pressure difference or gradient. The result is less oxygen being driven from the lungs into the blood. This is what happens at higher altitudes. This causes a decreased oxygen supply and decreased VO2 max.
Hey everybody, here we are at Ryerson University's next lab. It is about 3 weeks before I leave for my Kilimanjaro trip, and what I'm going to be having done here is a VO2 max test. A VO2 max treadmill test is going to be measuring the maximum amount of oxygen uptake that my body is able to use. So why that's important is because the higher your VO2 max is, the better off you're going to be at high altitudes. Because when you get to higher altitudes, say the summit of Mount Kilimanjaro, your VO2 max drops quite a bit. So I want to find out what my VO2 max value is so I know what I stand to lose. So what I've been doing currently is just training about 3 times a week. I'm not like an endurance athlete or anything elite at all, but I want to know right now like what my VO2 max is going to be so I know how I'm going to be reacting to high altitudes. Obviously, there's a lot of other factors involved with respect to acclimatization at high altitudes, but I know that VO2 max is one of them. So now we're going to talk to Vincent, who is going to be coordinating my VO2 max test. Just a little bit about the process.
So the test itself, it's going to start off with a 5-minute warm-up. It's just going to be a brisk walk, and then every 2 minutes after that, it's going to increase in speed and in incline. So that incline is going to get pretty high. That's what tires most people out. And then by the time, usually within 15 minutes, you'll hit your VO2 max, and then we'll tell you where you are. Yeah.
So I just finished my VO2 max treadmill test, and the last time I had this done, I was on a bike, and I remember it being really, really difficult because I'm not a bicyclist. But this one, the only thing that really surprised me was the incline. Like, I knew it was going to keep getting faster and faster, but I didn't realize how high the incline was going to be. Definitely not an incline that I had practiced at before. And the other interesting part was that there was clip over the nose, which I wasn't expecting. I didn't remember from my last test. So it just was made a little bit difficult to breathe in the beginning. But in the end, as soon as you kind of relax and get used to it, I think it was a lot easier. I feel as though maybe I could have gone a little bit longer, but my VO2 max, according to Vincent, was already reached before the point where I couldn't go anymore. So that was kind of interesting to me. So we're going to talk to Vincent shortly about my VO2 max value and what it means for high altitudes and in terms of my general fitness overall. So we'll be talking about him, and not expecting miracles, but hope it's like decent. So.
All right, so you did a great job. So your VO2 max value was 39.8. So given your age and your sex, you fall under the good category. You're right on the cusp of excellent. So that's great news. That occurred at a heart rate of 184.
Okay.
All right. And what we were also able to find out is your ventatory threshold. So that's the point during exercise when your breathing starts becoming labored. And what's happening at that point is you're starting to push yourself a little harder, and oxygen is no longer sufficient to sustain your exercise. So you need to incorporate anaerobic means of producing energy. So with anaerobic metabolism, it produces lactic acid, which contributes to a feeling of fatigue, and it also still produces carbon dioxide. So you still have your aerobic respiration going on in addition to your anaerobic respiration. So we're able to see that graphically because you get this sudden increase in carbon dioxide output, right? So we were able to find that out, and that occurred at a heart rate of 179 beats per minute. So that's actually quite close to your VO2 max. But if you're training around that heart rate, you're pushing your body to become more efficient at utilizing oxygen.
Got it.
So if you're doing endurance training, which you are doing, you want to work out at around that heart rate because, as I said, you want to reap the benefits of teaching your body to become more efficient at utilizing oxygen. So
Totally.
A lot of people tend to ask us, is it okay to work out above that? Yeah, of course it's okay. The thing is, above that, it's harder to sustain over time because you're starting to fatigue. You're starting to use that anaerobic means of metabolism. So it's hard to sustain over time.
And I just have a couple questions for you, just with respect to some of the athletes that you've seen come in here, and what types of sports have you seen the highest VO2 max values in?
So I've mainly only seen soccer players.
Okay.
And some female hockey players as well.
Okay.
But based on my knowledge, I know that cross-country skiers are incredibly high. Their VO2 maxes are around 90.
Okay.
Right. So for our soccer players, or soccer players in general, they're usually between 50 and 70. They don't need a high amount.
Right.
But just for their sport, right?
Sure.
So at higher altitudes, your VO2 max becomes lower, mainly because there's less oxygen in the atmosphere. So our bodies are acclimatized to take oxygen from a certain oxygen saturation in the atmosphere, right? When that decreases, your body, it becomes harder to extract that oxygen, right?
Right, yeah. Like I know there's a lot of other factors in altitude other than VO2 max, but I know that the higher you get in terms of your height, it becomes a lot harder in terms of your VO2 max value.
Well, I'm guessing with the higher VO2 max, your body is better at extracting oxygen, so that's why you would be more, I guess, better off.
So I was asked by somebody recently, after going through the testing and finding out my VO2 max value, whether I feel a little bit more confident about going into this Kilimanjaro climb. So to be honest, I know that the value is decent, and I have been training, and definitely a good VO2 max value is not going to hurt you at all during this climb. However, I do know that there's a lot of other factors when dealing with acclimatization to high altitude. And whether that high VO2 max does help you, say if you're a cross-country skier or a high-level endurance athlete, there are definitely other factors that people need to worry about. We're going to be finding out about those factors in our subsequent videos. So stay tuned for those, and hope you enjoyed what you saw. Don't forget to subscribe to Posture Me Perfect.